but we're so glad to have you all here. I'm going to go very quickly through some introductions so that you can get as much time as you possibly can with Dr. Russell James, who is joining us here today. I'll say more nice things about him today in a moment, but suffice to say that Dr. James is the preeminent academic in nonprofit fundraising in the entire world. And he just so happens to have an extreme specialty in the area of fundraising that is most near and dear to most of your hearts. So just consider yourself unfathomably fortunate to have Dr. James today, as we all feel on a regular basis. So we're going to talk about the Socratic Ministry of Christian Fundraising, guiding donors with questions with special guest Dr. Russell James, as you may have already guessed. Some very quick housekeeping before I get to hand the mic over. A quick note, this is approved for 1.0 CFRE credits. Those of you that are working towards this or working towards continuing your education, at the end of the session, we will drop a survey to certify your participation. Just make a quick note there, and we will keep it for you. Here's the agenda. The most important thing is that the recording and the slides will be sent around later today, and do not have perfectly predictive abilities, but my guess is that you will want to send the slides and recording to everyone touching fundraising in your organization because Dr. James is that excellent. Very quick intros. My name is Patrick. I'm lucky to be the co-founder and co-CEO of Free Will alongside my wonderful friend Jenny, pictured here. I am usually in Brooklyn, New York. I'm currently in Lake Tahoe on the California side, the second deepest lake in the United States, the fourth deepest lake in the world. It is gorgeous. It is lovely to be here in the summer, and I only have a few days left, so we're making the most of it. Free Will is the largest estate planning and plan giving solution in the United States, trusted by 2,200 leading nonprofits. And I will make a small plug here for participation in Make a Will Month, which is August. It is a fascinating way to get folks off the sidelines and get them to do estate planning when most of us know that estate planning is the most procrastinated activity potentially on the planet. And so it's a great avenue there. And we're very blessed to work with the whole Free Will team, generating more than 12.3 billion for nonprofits to date, 2,200 organizations of all stripes, including more than 500 churches, which is our largest individual type of organization, and over 5 centuries of combined fundraising experience. So it is now my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Russell James. Among many other things, Dr. James is the professor of charitable financial planning at Texas Tech University. He has 25 plus years of working and researching in the nonprofit sector. He is he is the most important influential academic researcher on the topics of major and plan giving, and he has a long background. And so I'm going to first ask you, Dr. James, what is making you happy today? And then I'll let you share a little bit more of your background that gives you insight into this particular work. And I will also let you share your screen so you can run us through the whole gamut.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Well, I tell you, what's bringing me the most joy is just the idea of you giving me the opportunity of hosting this, of the connections with so many of folks, many of whom I am familiar with. It's just great to have this opportunity. So, yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of background from many years of research, both on the secular side and then more recently, the last 4 years or so on the scriptural side, but also giving you some experience from years of practice as a plan giving director for Central Christian College, later as president of that college, which is mostly a major gifts fundraising focused role. And we're going to look at what I'll call the Socratic ministry of major gifts fundraising. We're going to look at how we can actually guide donors with questions. And so we're going to look at first a lot of the sort of scriptural concepts, the idea that, hey, the best practices in fundraising, they're not brand new. They're about 2,000 years old. And then we're going to get really practical on exactly what do we say and how do you phrase these things. So, by the way, One of the things I love about Patrick's webinars is that he offers free books to people sometimes. So I'm going to take that cue from him. Actually, all of my books are available for free. And so that includes some that are relevant to what we're talking about today, the biblical fundraiser in modern practice. Also, for those that like the deep dive word studies, the biblical fundraiser in ancient words, joyful wealth management, and the Socratic fundraiser. Now, if you want to get the paper version, those are on Amazon, but the digital versions, those are all free there. You don't have to sign up for anything. I don't have anything to sell you. I'm just sharing that with you in case you have interest. So let's talk about the idea of fundraising, but let's talk about it from a scriptural goal. Now, the concept of a fundraiser actually uses a fairly, what I would call, unfortunate word that's only about 100 years old. Fundraiser, what does that mean? Well, of course, fund means money. Raiser, that's somebody who goes and gets the money. So a fundraiser as a job title, that basically just means you're a money getter. This is a problem. It's a problem in that it's perhaps the worst possible way to describe what this job is, certainly what this ministry is. Now, in one sense, every occupation gets money, right? Whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, a drug dealer, prostitute, or a farmer. But that idea of being a money getter, it actually says nothing about the work itself. So I want to start with some really basic concepts that, hey, if we want to do the right kind of work, well, we've got to start with the right goal. So what is this right goal? And you might say, well, it's money getting, it's fundraising, right? We get people to give. So, first, I want you to think about, does God want giving? And I'm going to argue that the answer to that is actually the lawyer's favorite answer of it depends. I'm going to argue that God wants only a specific kind of giving. What does that look like? Well, in the passage that we'll spend the most time with here on the ministry to the rich, 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, it uses a word that means party time enjoyment. In fact, that word, apolison, is used only one other time in Scripture, and it is used in the context of enjoying the passing pleasures of sin, right? Or the good time that sin could bring for a little while. Here, it's not sinful, but it's just as party time enjoyable. This is not something that's unique to this particular passage on the ministry to the rich. We see it in 2 Corinthians 9:7, where giving is described as being hilariously joyful. In Acts 20:35, where Jesus describes it as being happy or blessed. In 2 Corinthians 9:8, where Paul describes it using the word for contentment, but then he does a 3x or three times increasing of that sense of contentment, with it being three different intensifiers. And then also in 2 Corinthians 8, where giving is described as overflowing from the abundance of joy. So hopefully not a shock for you here to find that Scripture says that God wants joyful giving. And one more piece, too. God wants joyful giving from the heart. And we see this pretty repeatedly in Scripture. Some verses here give you that example from 2 Corinthians 9:7. We see it in the Old Testament as well. The capital campaign for the tabernacle, right? That tell the sons of Israel to take a contribution for me from everyone whose heart moves him, right? This is not a tax. This is only from those who are of a willing heart. And then again, hey, there was many centuries later the capital campaign celebration for the temple, the temple construction, and we see these same kinds of language. The people rejoiced because they had offered so willingly. They made their offering wholeheartedly, and King David also rejoiced greatly. So we see this also in the New Testament. By the way, when you read that word generous that we often throw around, it actually means something a little different in the Greek in the New Testament. It's usually references this Greek word aplotes. It actually doesn't mean giving big. It means giving that is reflective of the heart. What this word means literally, ah or ha, that's ah means not, like apolitical or asexual. This is not. Well, this is not plotes. What is plotes? Is folded, not folded, meaning that it is single-hearted, simple, sincere. So this is the same concept we see in the ministry to the rich in 1 Timothy 6:18, where donors are directed to be rich in good works, but this word for good is special. It's a word that means beautiful as an outward sign of the inward good, noble, honorable character. Good, worthy, honorable, noble, and seen to be so. That's what that word means when we see it in that particular passage. Now, to this point, I think I'm saying things that I'll get some head nods with. But now I'm going to get a little offensive. And that is to understand that this notion is not a them problem, meaning the donors. It's an us problem, meaning the fundraiser. What do I mean by that? Look, we know that God wants joyful giving from the heart. Okay. If this is not the goal of our fundraising, then we're doing it wrong. This is not a matter of saying, oh, well, if our donors were just better people, then they would give us more. So they need to learn to be better people. Wrong, wrong, wrong. That's not how ministry works. It starts with us who are in this ministry that is called fundraising. We need to think about our goal as getting this donor to experience joyful giving from the heart. So, do you regularly consider what gift would be the most enjoyable for this donor? Or, even more powerfully, what gift would best express their personal values, their life story, their internal identity? That's what these words mean. Are we doing that? Or are we just trying to get money, right? Are we just being the money getter? So I'm going to argue that we need to quit blaming the donors, which is this weird phenomenon that you almost see exclusively just in the Christian sphere, where we just argue that, well, the donors should be better people. Instead of blaming the donors, let's start ministering to them. So we're not going to take the approach of saying, well, if only our donors were better people, they would give more and they would enjoy it more. Instead, we're going to talk about us. How can I provide joyful giving opportunities that really reflect and grow the positive aspects of my donor's heart? Now, I'm going to argue that this ministry process identifies what are those good, honorable, or noble features of a person's inward character? That's part of their identity. It's then going to connect those identity characteristics with a beautiful, visible, outward impact. That, in story terms, is the victory of the donor's story. And it's going to use that connection to motivate action. That's when we challenge the donor. So we're going to look at this cycle of connecting the donor's identity to motivate the challenge. The challenge will promise a victory, and that victory is going to be personally meaningful because it links back to the donor's identity. So we're going to work on the actual mechanics of getting to joyful giving from the heart. Number one, we're going to start with the positive aspects of their heart. This is their character or identity from their values, their people, and their life story. Number two, we're going to help build a giving outcome, what we might call in story terms of victory, that is a joyful expression of their heart. This is going to help grow those positive aspects of their character or identity. That's the concept of ministry. And then finally, we're going to encourage them. That's the challenge, to do it now, to make it happen now. So let's look at some examples of how we see, for example, Paul doing this in Scripture, where he has this repeated practice of starting with the positive aspects of the person's heart or their character or their identity. Notice, for example, when Paul was before the pagan Greek Areopagus, and he was very distressed, it said, by all of these various statues that were around, all of these idols. But when he addressed them, he started with the positive aspects of their identity. So Paul stood in the midst of Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I see that you are very religious in all respects. And then he used that as a starting place as to why they should listen to his argument. Or the same when he's in front of King Agrippa, he does the same thing, starting with, Hey, King Agrippa, I consider myself fortunate that I am about to make my defense for you today, especially because you are an expert in all customs and questions among the Jews. He does the same thing in front of Felix, the governor of Judea. He opens his argument saying, Hey, knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Again, we are starting with those positive aspects of their character, their identity, or their heart. He does the same thing when he's communicating with Timothy. He's getting ready to make big challenges to Timothy about his walk, but he starts with Timothy's identity. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, your identity, but a little bit of the life history which first dwelled in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well. Now, we see this exact sequence when we look at the ministry to the rich in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. And I'm going to argue that that passage, which is all one really long sentence in the original Greek, actually gives us the structure for major gifts fundraising. And that indeed is the premise of the biblical fundraiser book series, is to say, this sequence that we find on the ministry to the rich, this is the major gifts fundraising sequence. And it starts with the high capacity donor's identity. It's identity through their social values, pointing out that, hey, you are in the continuing, in the ongoing process of being not high minded. You're not above or separated from the fellowship community. It then goes on to their identity through their life history and values, pointing out that you have already in the past not set your hope on the uncertainty or hiddenness of wealth, but on God. And then it includes their identity based upon their values of gratitude and stewardship. God is the one who richly supplies us with all things for enjoyment. And so we're going to jump into the practice of this, but let me just say, if you're interested in a little bit more of this detail, the premise of the Biblical Fundraiser series is that this sequence that we see in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19 walks through this same idea of beginning with the donor's original identity, that then moves to the challenge that's connected to that identity. That challenge promises a victory. It's going to have an impact, and that victory then leads to an enhanced identity because it is connects back to the donor's original identity. So that's a lot to start with, but the only thing that I need you to remember before we get super practical right now is three words: identity connects to challenge, challenge promises a victory, and the victory is personally meaningful because it connects back to the donor's identity. Again, this is the same sequence that we see from the ministry to the rich, where we get each of these pieces. And for a deep dive on that, you can look at some of those books. So, how does this match with questions used by the most effective major gifts fundraisers? This sequencing of starting with identity, moving to the challenge, a challenge that promises a victory that leads to an enhanced identity or a personally meaningful victory. So we're going to walk through a step-by-step menu of questions, and we're going to get super practical here. Now, first, we begin with the idea of what is your role in the donor's journey. In the donor's journey, the fundraiser acts as the guiding sage. Now, in story terms, the guiding sage challenges the prospective hero with a choice. That will happen, for example, at the ask when we make the challenge to give. Now, I've described this in story terms, but we can also describe it in that passage on the ministry to the rich that uses a phrase that exactly parallels this role. Fundraising in 1 Timothy 6:17 directs the process, and it's actually a compound word of parangale. So para means to come alongside. You may have heard the phrase paraclete for Holy Spirit. That's the idea of coming alongside. So what are we to do? We are to come alongside, but we come alongside angele, that's angel, the authorized messenger. So we come alongside with an authorized message. That is our role. We don't beg from below. We don't attack from above. We don't stay far off. We come alongside. Who are we coming alongside? High capacity donors. This is about a ministry to the rich. And so this is our role in that process. This is major gift fundraising. We can see this from other New Testament researchers who explain that this concept, this term, can take on the mild sense of exhortation or counsel. And I say this because sometimes in a military context, this word means command, because in a military context, that's how commands were distributed throughout the ranks, because there weren't any PA systems loud enough for a general to communicate to everyone. But in a context of ministry, you're probably not going to be commanding people to give. Instead, it takes on this sense of exhortation or counsel. And that role is exactly the role that Paul uses in his own fundraising. Notice in his fundraising appeal, 1 Corinthians 8, it starts with, I am not saying this as a command. And it continues with, I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage. One translation I like reads this way, but in this matter, I give you an opinion, for my doing this helps forward your own intentions. That's how Paul opens up the conversation about giving, opens up his fundraising role. And I think that provides a really powerful example for the role that we should be playing in the donor's journey. So again, a compelling fundraising challenge is going to go through this process. It's going to connect to the donor's original identity, their history, people, or values. It's going to promise the hope of a victory that impacts the larger world, and it's going to deliver this enhanced identity, either of internal, private meaning, or of external, public reputation. So we begin with connecting the donor's original identity with the challenge. We want the donor to get to the point of thinking that I am the kind of person who makes gifts like this. Why? Maybe because of my people. People like me make gifts like this. Maybe because of my values. Giving to this cause or charity fits my values. Maybe because of my life history. Giving to this cause or charity fits my life story. Now, again, this connects back with what we see from the scriptural example. This ministry to the rich starts with their values. They're in the in-progress, continuing process of being not high-minded, not above the fellowship community. It continues with their life story. They have already in the past, but with continuing effect on the present, that's what the perfect tense means, placed their hope not in uncertain hidden riches, but in God, who richly provides us with all things for enjoyment. Also, this idea that I am the kind of person who makes gifts like this because of my people. God richly supplies us, that's everyone, with all things to enjoy, to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. So we've been supplied in different ways, but we all use it the same way. And then finally, this victory is going to lead to an enhanced identity. It's the idea that I want to be the kind of person who makes an impact like this. Why? Because of my people, this impact helps or is supported by people like me or with me. Because of my values make this impact meaningful to me, or because of my history, my life story makes this impact meaningful to me. And we see this again in the later section of this passage, where we see that the donors get what? They get to be rich and good, beautiful, visible works. They get to become, and this is using their I am statement, ani, they get to become a generous, joyful sharer. They get to, and good question. Yes, the slides will be shared later. Patrick always shares all of his slides on his webinars. And of course, they're also at encouragegenerosity.com. Thanks for that, John. I do go through a lot of information very quickly. Sorry about that. But we also see in that passage that there's another modifier on the I am verb, which is you get to be a connected sharer with the fellowship community. This is koinonia sharing, and that's the word that's used here. And ultimately, you get to take hold of that which is truly life. Finally, we want to show that that challenge will lead to the victory, that this gift is going to make a tangible, visualized impact. And those are exactly the words that we see in this major gifts fundraising passage. You get to do good. You get to, this is a good, whether it be seen to be so or not. First type of good. You also get to do the second type of good. You get to be rich in kalos good works, that is good, worthy, honorable, noble, and seen to be so. And what work is the donor buying? That is the language that's being used here. The donor is buying work. Work is active, work is visualizable. Now, one thing is even more powerful than telling this story about the donor. It's getting the donor to tell this story about themselves. Now, hopefully, it's not a surprise to you that Jesus often taught this way. Just in the book of Matthew, there's the citations to all the times he used this Socratic approach to teaching by asking questions. And no, I'm not going to read all of those because I would end the whole hour just doing that. What we want to do when we're asking questions, again, is to elicit the donor's people, their family and affiliations, values, their beliefs and principles, and their life history, those key life story elements. And then we want to connect those with generosity and impact. Ultimately, we can get a little bit more narrow. We can connect them with a specific cause or the specific organization. Then we can get even more narrow, connect them with a specific project or work within the organization. Then we review and confirm each step in the cycle at the proposal, and we reference each step in the cycle at the ask itself. So we're going to go all the way through this process from broad general questions all the way to at the end, actually making the big money ask. So this is a spiral conversation. The steps in this story, it's not a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing, repeated, circular narrative. And our fundraising questions, we're going to be progressing from general to specific, from broad to narrow. How do we do this? Well, we begin by justifying asking the questions. Then we're going to ask those questions that connect to the donor's identity, that we're going to help them to define a personally meaningful victory. And then we're going to ask questions that present a challenge. How do we justify asking questions? There's different ways to do it. We can say, hey, I'm interested in your story. This is a social motive. Maybe I need your help or advice. This is an honor or an impact motive. Or maybe I can help or advise you, providing value as a motive. Then we're going to ask questions that connect the donor's identity and help them to define their personally meaningful victory. We ask opening questions, which is what we're going to look at here in a moment, then follow-up questions, confirmation questions after we make a reflective statement. So yes, you do have to listen to their answer. And then we want to spot solutions while we're repeating this sequence of steps. Ultimately, we make the challenge. We ask for permission to ask first. This is not a drive-by asking. We're going to make sure that they know it's coming. This is major gifts fundraising. And then we're going to connect the gift with that full story cycle before we ask for the gift. That's a whole lot of theory, a whole lot of scripture. Now I want to get really super practical, showing you how these theory concepts match with questions that successful fundraisers ask. And we're literally going to look at 200 examples. Yes, 200 examples, not because there's a perfect way to do it, but just so you get the flavor of all the different ways that you can go through this three-step process. But one of the things that I want to emphasize as we go through these examples is don't miss the point. This is not just sales training. This is a ministry to the donor. The goal of these questions is to open a ministry conversation with the donor. We want to help the donor discover their own most personally meaningful, enjoyable good works. Why? Because we don't want just donors. We want joyful donors who are giving from their heart as an expression of their identity or their good characteristics. So let's look at how we open up identity conversations. We can do this through one of three ways. We can ask about the donor's life history, the donor's people, or the donor's value, and then connect that with the charity, the cause, or the philanthropy, or philanthropy in general. So let's start with the idea of connecting with their values. How do we do this? It can be really straightforward. We can just open up, hey, what inspires you to give? Or what inspired you to make this gift? Or even what inspired you to make your first gift to this organization? We are inviting the donor to express their giving motivations to help them tell the story about how their values connect in with the cause or their giving. We can also talk about people. So this is where we ask about the people connections to the cause or the charity. And for this one, I just want to make sure that some people are still alive out there. So I've put the A, B, C, and D because yes, I am a professor. So the thing I love more than anything is to give exams. Although these are all right answers, I'm just curious which of these four approaches, as we go through them, might you feel most comfortable in doing? And you can type in the A, B, C, or D as we go through them. So A is have others in your life been affected by this cause? B, is there anyone in your family who also cared about this cause? C, how has this charity impacted your family or loved ones? Or D, have any of your family members or close friends been involved with our organization? Now, as we get in lots of responses, a big amount like the A's and the C's, Ben likes the D. We've got some more D's. Melanie's a lot of C's. Melanie is for a D. Sherry is for a D. Christy is for an A. One of the reasons that it's really important, not just to see what matches you, but to look at these responses that are coming in, is to understand there's no one magic question. It is what fits you, what is most comfortable for you in your ministry position, your position of ministering to the donor, to open up these conversations, right? So that's why I'm going to be going through so many examples. There's not a perfect question. There is instead the right process that we want to go through. And notice the enormous variety of all of the different responses that we see here. We'll see if this is also the case with the next group of questions, where we ask about people's philanthropy people's philanthropy connections. Did your parents or other family members support any charitable causes? A. B. Can you tell me a bit more about who taught you to be generous or where your generous spirit comes from? If you like C, type in C for when you were young, was there anyone whom you considered a role model for giving? Or simply D, who are your philanthropic role models? So we got a lot of folks that like B here. We're getting some D's here as well. And Jim even says, hey, C has worked for him in other circumstances. So we get some practical experience here. A lot of favoring of the B, and I understand that for sure. But notice what we're doing here. We're trying to get the donor to tell their own story that walks through this process that they are now connected connecting their identity with this philanthropic process. Or Kathy shares, who is your generosity hero? Now, by the way, I should point this out that even though these are new, and as a researcher, those little boxes you see there, I'm citing to all of these other really effective fundraisers that these are the questions that they use. But this is the same process that we see when Paul is addressing Timothy. When he's getting ready to challenge him, he begins with Timothy's family background, making those people connections. Okay, some other examples of identifying these people connections. Is you're giving your decision, or do you decide together with someone else? What is their connection to this charity or cause? For a different kind of organization, do you have a favorite doctor or staff person at the hospital? Or do you know any of our leaders, board, committee members, staff, volunteers, or other supporters? Broadly speaking, what is your rationale for charitable giving? Who inspired you to create your donor advised fund or private family foundation? How does your giving reflect your values, your feelings, and your aspirations? One of the other things to notice, I am pulling the exact phrasing that's used by many of the most effective fundraisers. And I'm giving you citations here so you can actually go to the actual book and chapter where they are suggesting these things. But I want you to notice on how powerful the connection is between what the most effective modern fundraising experts will tell you and what's 2,000 years old, what Paul said to do in this ministry to the rich to encourage generosity. So, some other examples. Tell me about a few other causes you support. Why do you support them? Would you mind telling me about the causes that are most important to you? Do you typically give to the same nonprofits every year? Why do you support them? And you might think, oh, I don't ever want to ask them about their other causes they support. Yes, you do, because you want to know what their values are that underlie that. Because once you know what their values are, you might have some projects at your organization that actually align with those values that they don't know about. We can ask about where else do you give and why? Where does this organization fit in your overall philanthropic priorities? Where does our charity fall on your list of charitable priorities? Or we can ask about values attributed to others. What do you think are the most important factors to donors who make a major gift to our organization? What is the single most important reason that you believe someone would support the project? How can we make giving to this organization more compelling for other donors? We can also do open-ended. We don't have to specifically ask about life history, people, or values. We can just do open-ended questions like, hey, do you mind if I ask, what is your connection to our mission or organization? How could we connect with you better? How would you like to be more involved? Is there any area within the organization where you could see yourself becoming more involved? So this idea is just open-ended, trying to elicit those connections. Why do you give to this organization? Why do you support us? What's motivated you to be such a consistent supporter of the organization? Why have you been such a loyal donor? Why have you been so loyal? Why does what we do interest you? Why do you serve on blank committee? Why does this cause matter to you? What's the key thing that persuaded you to join our cause? Why do you care so much that you would sacrifice your time and invest your dollars to move this mission forward? When you think about programs such as ours, what motivates you to support them? Or the other way, I understand you haven't supported our cause significantly in the past. Tell me more about that, right? Trying to get those underlying values. Or of all the charities you could support, why do you support us? Now, a quick side note, sometimes you need to be a little sensitive about using the term why, because why did you do that? That can feel like an attack. It can cause defensiveness. So you might think about a substitute of what led you to this or what motivates you for this. So now I'm going to take another vote because there's lots of different ways that we can connect their people or their values to the challenge. And I've shared a bunch of them here with you, interested in what's most comfortable for you. And thanks, Stephanie, for sharing that question as well. Do you like the approach of A, cause or charity people connections, B, philanthropy people connections, C, values underlying the giving motivations, D, values underlying the causes supported, or E, values attributed to others. Lots of folks like C or D, one for an a bunch of C. And so that seems to be the most popular. C, and D. Lots of C's, values underlying the giving motivations, or D, values underlying the causes supported. So seems like we've got a lot of preference there for those C and D, but finally got a B. Thanks, Michelle, for that one, of their people connections as well. Now, if you were in my class and I could supervise you closely, I would force you to construct your own favorite question, but I'm going to leave this to you because you should do this. Create what is most comfortable for you and then work with other people. Just practice it, right? It's like shooting a basketball. Just do it a bunch of times until you get comfortable with it. Practice on people at your work so that you can then understand a little bit, get more comfortable in that process. Now, again, what's the point of all this? Does this process lead to major gifts? Absolutely, 100% it does. But what's the point? The real point is to create joyful giving from the heart. This process leads to the most enjoyable giving. And here's the key: that accurately reflects positive aspects of their heart. We can also ask about their life history. So, for example, when did you first get interested in this cause? Would you mind telling me about how you became connected to the organization? How did you first find out about us? What first brought your attention to our organization? How did you first get involved with the organization? How did you get connected? Can you tell me what brought you to this charity in the first place? How did you get or come to be involved with our organization? How did you decide to first start supporting the organization? What first made you interested in supporting this organization? What got you started as a donor? What led you to make your first gift to this organization? Or a little bit broader about their philanthropy origin story. Where did you learn to give? How did you learn to be generous? What was your first memory of an act of generosity? What is your first memory of when you knew it was important to give back and help those people or organizations in need? What are your best memories of your time at, say, if you're representing a camp or school? What experiences were most meaningful to you during your time as a student? What were your favorite moments of a student if you're at a school or university? What's your favorite place on campus? What's the best thing about your experience here? Did you participate in any activities while a student? Tell me about your favorite faculty member. We're trying to elicit those life history connections. Tell me about your journey since you graduated from the university. Tell me about your journey since you were first diagnosed with a healthcare cause. Tell me about your journey since you first became involved in this cause. We want to elicit their life history connections. We can also ask, how has this cause or organization been important in your life? Or tell me your ABC charity story. How has it impacted your life? How has the organization's work affected you personally? What have been your past experiences with the organization? And Jim shares his example. Tell me your favorite memory from sponsorship. Love that one. If you tell others about your care at the hospital, how would you describe it? That's for a hospital organization. What have been your most positive experiences at our charity? What is the most meaningful experience you've had through your involvement? Again, a lot of different ways we can elicit these life history connections: their cause or charity origin story, their philanthropy origin story, their journey through their life, the cause or charity life history review. And again, take the time to work out your favorite questions. Then what we want to do is to define a personally meaningful victory, or in scriptural terms, what good works will bring the most enjoyment to the donor. So we want them to start thinking about what changes do you believe would make the world a better place? If you could change the world, what would you do? How would you like to make a difference in this community or in this world? Notice this is starting super broad, global victories. Or we can talk about the future, maybe talking about estate planning. What would you like to pass on to future generations as you look out to the future? What is the legacy you would like to leave? What positive difference do you want to make? Do you have any lifetime charitable goals? Tell me about those. Or this, I love the no restrictions or the blue sky gift. If there were no restrictions on you, what would you like to do philanthropically? Or in the best of all possible worlds, what would you do to support support our charity? If you could do anything for this charity, if the sky was the limit, what would that look like for you? Or if money were no object, what would you like to see happen with our program? So we want to describe this ideal, wonderful impact that will be motivational. Once we get that, then we can start thinking about what is going to be the most meaningful projects or steps or possibilities for this donor. If money were no object, what would we be doing that we're not now doing? If money were no object, what kind of an impact would you like your giving to have? Or simply, what would be your dream gift? Or what change do you want to see because of your giving? What do you want to achieve with your charitable donations? What do you hope to achieve with your philanthropy? Or what would you ultimately like to accomplish with your philanthropy at our charity? We're trying to help the donor to define a personally meaningful victory. We've got other questions for overall. And by the way, if I don't get to all your questions today, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or email or otherwise, and I'll be happy to address those individually. What are your goals for your donor advised fund or private foundation? How long do you want it to last? What are you trying to accomplish with your philanthropy? And how might we help? As you think about making a difference with your philanthropy, what appeals to you most? What kind of an impact would you like to have on this cause or perhaps these beneficiaries? Again, just trying to help the donor define a personally meaningful philanthropic victory. What are your goals for this gift? What kind of an impact would you do you want to make with your gift? Or if they have a current scholarship or an endowment, what kind of an impact do you ultimately want it to have? Or in the estate planning context, have you thought about how you would like your planned bequest gift to be used so we can help them think about that personally meaningful victory? Here's another one. A year from now, how would you know that you made a wise move with your philanthropic investment in us? Or if you're going to make a significant investment in the organization, a gift in the $1 million range, what would you like to accomplish with that gift? Or why do you think this project is important to the community? We can also define it in terms of organizational change victory. If you could change anything to better this charity, what would it be? Or you've been such a loyal member of our family and have supported us for so many years. What are your dreams for where you'd like to see this organization go in the future? Or what are your long-term hopes for our charity and its mission? Or if you had the ability to enhance or expand ABC Charity's mission in a specific way, what would it be? What could we do to be more effective in the future? Or we can define organizational change victories using questions like, where do you think we could improve our services or programs? Are there any thoughts you'd like me to take back to share with our CEO, President, Executive Director? What are the most critical results that you expect our organization to produce? What could we do better in your opinion? Now, don't be afraid of these questions. I know there is this fear of, well, they're going to tell us to do something that we'll never in a million years would do that project, right? You want to elicit that because once you know this is something they really care about, you can start to unpack why. What are the values that cause them to want to go in this direction? That even if it's a direction you would never go in a million years, you start to understand, oh, this is why that's important to them. And you can begin to think about what other projects have those similar values that you might connect them in with. If you could change anything about the organization, what would it be? If there was one thing you could change about our charity today, what would it be? Or, if we're walking them along, what were your impressions of the tour? What intrigued you most? Is there a particular program, project, or area of outreach that interests you most? Or if you were to make a significant commitment, is there a particular area you would want your gift to support? Or if I can help you find a way, what at our nonprofit would you most like to support financially? We can ask about their general interests. What areas of this organization are you most interested in? What interests you personally about the problem we're addressing? What excites you the most about our organization's work in the world? Thanks for that, Janelle. What do you think? What do you think we do best? What do you think is the best thing about what our nonprofit does? Um, What contributions to the community does the organization make that are important to you? Or simply, what's the most exciting thing you've heard about at our institution recently? We can define a gift, a victory with a gift option. Hey, what do you think about this opportunity? What's most compelling to you about the project? Could you ever see yourself being involved in a project like this? Or if we're at an event, what were your impressions of that event? Again, the notion is that there's lots of different questions, but they all have the same purpose. We're trying to help the donor to define a personally meaningful victory. What good work is actually reflective of their individual identity, their values, their beliefs, their good character. Again, work on constructing these so that you have a set that are most comfortable for you. Now, having gone through all of that, and thanks for the kind words. Absolutely, Andrea. The passion questions have been really popular, and that certainly fits this idea. But I want us not to get lost that this is not just sales training. What's the point of all this? Does this process lead to major gifts? Yes, it does. But the real point is to create joyful giving from the heart. We use this process because this process leads to the most enjoyable giving that accurately reflects the positive aspects of the donor's heart. This is not throwing rocks at our donors because, oh, they're not good enough. And if they were just better people, they would give us more. No, no, no. This is the ministry process where we start with those positive aspects of their particular character, of their heart. And then we find projects that align with that, that allow them to express that so that their giving truly comes from the heart, which is the most fun. It's the most joyful giving. We can also ask about defining a victory with gift implications. Does your philanthropy give you joy? What philanthropic gift has given you the greatest joy? Tell me about that. What part of philanthropy gives you the most joy? What gift has brought you the most joy? Tell me about some meaningful gifts you have made. How do you know when you've made a good gift? Share a couple of examples of good gifts with me. Why do you feel they were good? What means the most to you personally about what we do? When you look at all your giving, be it time or money, what captures your heart and your attention? Or what if this goal was accomplished? What would that mean to you? What would it mean for you to make a personal impact in this particular project? Or what would it mean for you and your family to have an enduring impact on that particular cause? What makes giving a rewarding experience? We can also use this with a menu of options. Which of these projects would be most meaningful or important to you? If you had to choose between making a gift towards the new building, the scholarship fund, or the endowment, which would you select and why? If you could have your family's name on something like a building, scholarship, lectureship, what would be the most meaningful to you? Or if you had money to fully fund any one aspect of the project, what would it be? The passion question, somebody mentioned it earlier. Here is a version of what is often used and called the passion question. What would you like to accomplish with your money that would be meaningful to you? What would you want to do or like to accomplish with your money or your giving or philanthropy in this cause or at this charity that would be meaningful to you? Now, Jim brings up a really important question of how about a gift to the general fund? Well, notice that we can actually learn what are those specific aspects that are most compelling for them. So when we make an ask, it doesn't have to be a restricted ask, but where do we want them to get involved with? Well, now that we know they care about this, this is the area we want them to be involved with. What are we going to talk about? We're updating on the organization. We're going to talk about these things. And so even if we are making an ask for the general fund, we can make that ask that frames it in a way that emphasizes the parts of that general fund that are going to be most meaningful to them. I will point out, however, that in Paul's major fundraising effort that we see described in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, that was a restricted gift for a specific project. It was not money that went to the general church budget. So it is okay to ask for restricted gifts. And by the way, if you're asking for a gift restricted to something that's already in your budget, it works just the same as an unrestricted dollar. So do get creative at selling the pieces of your budget rather than just always going with unrestricted for everything. So then what do we do after this opening? These are opening questions. We, of course, have follow-up questions. We know what these phrases are like. What else? Tell me more about this. Then we have reflective summary and confirmation questions. This is where we've been listening for those connections. And once we have those, we're going to summarize. So what you're saying is, and then we make a reflective statement, and then a confirmation question. Is that right? Do I have it right? And we're not confirming everything they've said. We're confirming only those elements that are part of their giving story. Along the way, we want to spot solutions. We've been listening, identifying connections, confirming those connections, and we want to match those not just with gift options, but also with donor experiences. What experiences would strengthen those connections? Are there particular programs, areas, or projects that match? What employees, beneficiaries, or other donors should they meet? We also want to spot solutions, getting ready for the ask. Maybe there should be some peers at the major gift solicitation. Are there giving instruments that match? Scholarships, endowments, virtual endowments, charitable trust, estate gifts, memorial gifts, other instruments. This is what you bring to the role in your guiding sage role, where you come alongside with this authorized message. And then ultimately, we need to ask for the next step. Now, maybe that next step is just them getting more involved, and that's great. But maybe the next step is the challenge. That is, we've got to make the ask. We first ask for permission to ask. Would you be open to exploring ideas to blank? Would you be interested to hear more about how you could blank? Would you like to hear about some possible ways to blank? We'd like to show you some ways that you can blank. And the blank, by the way, is the impact, the victory that they want to accomplish. Or this one, my job is to put together personalized options for you to consider. Would you mind if we set a time to look over some of those ideas together? We're asking for permission to ask, right? Sometimes it can be to address a problem. If we could show you a way to blank, would that be of interest to you? Can I tell you about a gift option that would blank? Or we can share others like you have found this to be helpful. Hey, others in your situation have blank. Would you like to hear more about how this works? Or you remind me of another donor. Do you mind if I share her story? She was able to blank. Is that something that might be useful for you? Then we get to the ask meeting itself. I want to argue that the ask shouldn't be just a naked challenge. Instead, we want to go through this full story cycle, review and confirm those connections before we then make the ask. And then when we make the ask sentence, our ask phrase at the actual ask itself can include all three parts of this story cycle. What does this actually sound like in real world? You've been a friend of this library for over 20 years. You understand how a new regional history collection would preserve our shared heritage. Would you consider a gift of $50,000 to lead the campaign to make this a reality? Notice how those three sentences make those three connections. And then, of course, the fourth step, hopefully you know this by now in fundraising, shut up. Don't talk. The donor talks next, no matter how long that takes. Or you can see how this might work for other causes. You've done so much to improve care for others since your own diagnosis with breast cancer. You understand how lives could be changed by offering free early screening. Would you consider a gift of $100,000 to help fund next year's screening clinics? Or this one, you've always had such a heart for supporting the arts in this community. You understand how this new exhibition could make a real impact for art lovers in the whole city. Would you consider a gift of $50,000 as our lead campaign donor to make this happen? I'll end with this one. You've been such a loyal alumnus of this department since you graduated years ago. You understand how important scholarships are in giving students the chance for an education. Would you consider a gift of $100,000 to fund a permanent name scholarship to help others like you become proud alums in the future? The point of making sure that you know this is where you're going is that you can't make the story cycle ask if you haven't elicited the full story. So it's foolproof, because if you can't make an ask with all three of those story elements, you're not ready to make that ask. There's no magic question, but there is a magic story, a magic sequence. And that sequence is 2,000 years old. It's the same sequence we see in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, the ministry to the rich. Well, folks, I'm out of time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick, and hope some of this has been of interest to you.
Thank you so much. If everyone can join me in thanking Dr. James. Uh, Dr. James, you know it's been a good webinar when people say that was a good webinar. It's a great webinar when people say it's a great webinar. And then it's, but the compliments in the chat are like, Russell James is the GOAT, which I know you know what that means, but for other people, it's an acronym for greatest of all time, which is usually reserved for the Tom Brady, the Meryl Streeps, the Michael Jordans, the Marie Curies of the world. So just to give you a sense of how grateful everybody is. A couple of very quick announcements. On Thursday, July 31st, we're going to do a session on free will for faith groups. So how other faith groups are using free will to inspire generosity and increase planned gifts. If you'd like to join that, just make a note in the survey. And then on July 22nd, which is this Tuesday, we're doing a bunch of analysis on sort of the 2022 economy, how tax changes, the overall donor environment, and what you should do for a standout end of year in 2025. So you're welcome to join us for that if you would like. No promises to live up to the GOAT standard, but we will do our best and we will enjoy it. Dr. James, thank you so much for being here. I think you can tell from the chat how valuable this was for folks and how much smarter we all feel than we did at noon Eastern, which is really the measure of a great session. And I think everyone also had a great time. So it's like sugar-coated broccoli. We loved taking it in, and it was so good for us. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.